Good morning, everyone. Welcome to GCEC 2017. We are so happy and so thrilled to have you here. As we begin these opening ceremonies, I would like to remind everyone that we are on traditional Mi'kmaq territory. This is a commitment from all of the universities across Canada in recognition of the truth and reconciliation. A lot of preparation has gone into the conference, preparing. You'll see all the people with the blue t-shirts, so reach out to them for directions as you go about the day. But as we stand here now, this is our moment to come together as a group and collaborate with you. Our theme throughout the conference is collaboration, making a dent in the universe together. And we are not London, we are not New York, we are not Boston, we are not Silicon Valley. We are a regional economy we are in the midst, the universities in this region are in the midst of trying to figure out how they support urban ecosystems as well as strong rural populations. And much like you, our centers are seeing entrepreneurship being a movement across the campus and out into the region. This morning, you will hear from 3 university presidents who've come together. President Florzone from Dalhousie University, Eddie Campbell from UMB, and Robert Summerby-Murray from St. Mary's. And I'll share with you an excerpt from each of them as I introduce them, because they are very big supporters of collaboration in the region, and they helped us shape this conference. Following that, we'll have a keynote speaker from Desh Deshpande, and with Q&A. And we've done something a little different this year with the conference. We've bookended it with 2 plenary sessions. So following the Q&A with Desh, we'll have a plenary session, the Great Debate. And then at the end of the conference, we'll end with a plenary session on metrics and how do we measure our success as together we make a dent in the universe. So at this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Richard Florzone, president of Dalhousie University. He is a strong supporter of entrepreneurship on our campus and has made it one of the strategic priorities to support students, researchers, and also out into the community as we spread entrepreneurship. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Richard Florzone.
Well, thanks so much, Mary, for that introduction, and let me be one of the first to welcome you to Halifax. It's really wonderful to see you here. We're excited in this community, as you are in your own home communities, about the possibilities and potential for innovation-driven entrepreneurship to spur growth in our communities, to drive more inclusive growth. And so it's wonderful to get together and talk about that and to share lessons and collaborate on how we might move forward more together. We're so proud. I'm so proud. Of course, you're going to hear from my great colleagues at St. Mary's University and University of New Brunswick. And it's a source of great pride for us. We've been planning it for months to host the first GCEC conference ever to be hosted in Canada. So welcome to the Great White North. So this year's theme is all about catalyzing deep change in regional communities, making a dent in the universe together. It's a great topic. It's timely for the economic growth in our region as it is for yours, because regional collaboration is key to success and to overcoming challenges together. Now, of course, each region faces its own unique opportunities and challenges. I'm sure your regions are different from ours. In Atlantic Canada, though, we face an aging population, out-migration of youth, and a significant decline in resource-based industries. At the same time, we're a magnet for talent. My university attracts a higher percentage of out-of-province students than any other large university in Canada. We set records in attracting international students. People love to come here. It's a challenge of creating the economic growth to have them stay. So we need to think about ways to capitalize on our regional advantages and figure out, of course, one of the best ways to do that is through strategic collaboration. Now, of course, here In Atlantic Canada, we're close to innovation hubs in Boston, in New York, and London, and we've built some of those relationships. And those are places where entrepreneurs can access funding opportunities, they can access mentors and networks of innovators and entrepreneurs. But we also have a growing innovation district right here in Halifax that is also kind of making its own regional connections across Atlantic Canada. You might be surprised to learn that Halifax actually was home to more technology startups than any other city in Canada in 2015, outpacing even places like Waterloo or Vancouver, Toronto. I recently collaborated on an op-ed about a week ago with our mayor that talked about some of this growth in Halifax. It cited what the Brookings Institution calls innovation districts. Innovation districts, of course, are places where leading-edge anchor institutions like universities and companies cluster and connect with startups, with business incubators and accelerators. And of course, we're seeing that in Halifax. In our innovation district, we have leading universities, we have hospitals, startup accelerators, startup hubs, and more than 100 tech companies and research labs, all within a 5-kilometer corridor. So that connectivity is happening. The question is, how do we build on and accelerate it? Well, let me tell you a little bit about a few initiatives that we're launching to support that growth. First off is our collaboration with MIT and MIT REAP. Now, when you look worldwide at universities that foster innovation and entrepreneurship, of course, MIT stands out. One of their recent studies showed that the revenue from companies started by their alumni equaled about $2 trillion annually, which is larger than the world's 10th largest economy. So, obviously, we're not all going to get there overnight, but it shows the potential, right, in terms of innovation-driven entrepreneurship. And in fact, our keynote speaker this morning, who we're so proud to have here, Dr. Desh Deshpande, has played a key role in developing that ecosystem at MIT and helping them transition from idea to impact. Now, each year MIT selects a handful of regions to work with to transfer some of its knowledge on innovation and entrepreneurship. Recently, Nova Scotia was chosen, and so we're part of a cohort with 5 other jurisdictions, with Iceland, Dubai, Lagos, Madrid, and Lima. And the main idea, I think, behind MIT REAP is that growing an ecosystem of innovation really takes 5 players. You need 5 strong types of players and the interconnections between them. Of course, between entrepreneurs, large corporates, universities, government, and risk capital. And that's what builds an ecosystem. So some of the pieces that we're building around it, I won't go into all the detail. We have a project called the Idea Hub, which is a space on our engineering campus that will not only provide great teaching and learning and research space for engineering, but will also create space for student-led startup companies and mentors. We have the Creative Destruction Lab, which started out of the University of Toronto and the Rotman School. It is basically a mentorship program. It's had great success. It set itself a 5-year target of raising $50 million in equity and instead raised $1.5 billion. So they've set up CDL West at UBC and CDL Atlantic here at Dow, which will focus on blue and green, the ocean economy and clean energy. So we expect exciting things from that. And then, of course, we have our partnership with Tesla. We have one of the world's leaders in lithium-ion batteries, and we're proud that we're the only university on the planet that Tesla has a research relationship with. That was signed in 2015, and with our Dow professor, Jeff Dawn. And we're looking to expand on that, to expand into other battery technologies. Tesla Canada has its headquarters here in Dartmouth, and that's something where that we seek to grow and capitalize on further, clean energy. Finally, around oceans, last year we were awarded the largest federal research grant in Canada for something called the Ocean Frontier Institute, which brought together 3 of the 4 Atlantic provinces with 4 of the top 5 ocean institutes in the world, including MIT Woods Hole and Columbia, with 19 companies, all 3 levels of government and the Navy, to look at ocean sustainability, fisheries and aquaculture, and ocean climate and chemistry, but also to look at solutions. And we're now talking with the federal government about creating a supercluster around oceans that essentially is looking at the digital ocean, the possibilities around ocean data and sensors as they apply to a whole range of industries, from shipping to defense to fisheries and aquaculture. So expect to hear more about that. If I could leave you with one final note as I wrap up and hand it to my fellow presidents, is if I could leave you with one charge as you go home, is to continue to think about this topic of inclusive innovation. Put it front and center. We've all been amazed. I love technology. I'm an engineer and a physicist. I'm a graduate of MIT, so I'm very proud of the place. And we're all amazed by technology and what it can do and what it can fuel in terms of economic growth. There are a couple challenges with the tech industry, both with gender diversity, but also increasingly people are realizing that some of the tech-fueled growth of the last couple of decades has contributed to income inequality. So I think the challenge for us is, we all want communities that are intelligent, that are inclusive, and that are inspiring. So as we advance our initiatives, let's think about ways that we can make more inclusive, not just with regards to gender, but economically more inclusive to really drive the health of our economies and our communities so that we can all be stronger together. I have no doubt that we can do that. Thank you again for your participation in this conference, but more importantly for the work you do to drive entrepreneurship in your home communities. I think together we really can build a better world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Richard. I would like to introduce Dr. Robert Summerby Murray from St. Mary's University. And in helping us shape this conference, St. Mary's has made a very strong commitment to innovation and entrepreneurship. And in a statement made by St. Mary's, we believe entrepreneurship essentially changes students. Building an entrepreneurial mindset empowers and emboldens students to take on a leadership role as both a citizen in whatever organization they end up in, if not to start a business. So St. Mary's University is very much a partner in putting this conference together. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert Summerby Murray.
Thank you, Mary. Welcome to everybody. Bienvenue à tous, Pijilazi, and I'm very pleased to be here, delighted indeed, to continue the words of welcome from my colleague Richard Florizone of Dalhousie University. It's exciting to see this conference coming together, and particularly to have you here this morning. I want to refrain from a deep analysis of the metaphysics and quantum mechanics of the phrase making a dent in the universe, which I think is just brilliant, particularly for a Friday morning. But I want to focus instead on the word together in the conference title. It's a key word, it's a key theme, and Richard has alluded to it already this morning. Together, we are building an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem. And as Richard has noted, this is particularly significant for us here in Atlantic Canada. It is a key component of what we call the Atlantic Growth Strategy, an initiative of government that involves partnership with institutions of higher learning, with business, industry, and a range of governmental authorities. So the entrepreneurial ecosystem is vital for us. With our clustering of universities here in Halifax, in Atlantic Canada, including, as you'll hear in a few minutes, from our colleague, the President of the University of New Brunswick, we have a connection right across our region. And we are building new solutions for research and inquiry around business opportunities. Our universities are actively engaged in this, and I hope that this conference helps to demonstrate that in terms of the realities on the ground for us in our teaching and learning. At St. Mary's, our strategic plan for the university aims to graduate students, and I quote now, with creative and entrepreneurial mindsets. That is a key component of our discovery and innovation mandate in our programs. This involves interdisciplinary thinking. And that's why we are one of the few universities in the country, perhaps the only university in Canada, with a BA in entrepreneurship. We partner with other universities as well, and we partner around the world. We are distinctive in this country for having one of the highest percentages of international students of any university across Canada, and indeed very high in relation to North American universities, over 30%. What that means is that we are focusing on global innovation. We work with partners in South China, for example, with a partnership with Beijing Normal University in Zhuhai. We sign agreements with creative labs in South China around media and digital communications and business entrepreneurship. In our own programs, we are spinning off tech companies. We have one program, a master's program in technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation, and the key role of that graduate program is to create business through entrepreneurial thinking. We partner with others in our region in a variety of sandbox programs, and you may hear about some of those over the next 2 days. partnerships with the Nova Scotia Community College, with Dalhousie University, Mount St. Vincent University, and the Atlantic School of Theology. Our Change Lab Action Research Institute brings the community into this, often small communities, small businesses who need the encouragement to be part of solutions in their regions. And we do much of this as well through our Sobey School of Business. Indeed, later this morning, I will be part of an announcement from the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency with increased funding to our programs to support entrepreneurship through our Business Development Centre in our Sobey School of Business. All of this to say then that this conference is well timed and of great significance to all of the partners. We are therefore extremely pleased to have you all here. We look forward to hearing further conversations, and I hope as well that you enjoy your time here in Halifax and learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Summerby Murray. I'd like to introduce Dr. Eddie Campbell, the University of New Brunswick. And in helping us form this conference, Dr. Campbell's statement was very much that the University of New Brunswick is committed to fostering entrepreneurship and developing a regional ecosystem, and is also committed to encouraging its faculty to take a lead role in activating these initiatives. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Eddie Campbell.
Well, thank you very much, Mary, and let me also extend my welcome to all of you for joining us here in Halifax and in Atlantic Canada. I do hope you get a chance to get outside the city. The fall colors are absolutely spectacular, and let's be clear, we don't often have summer in October. Thank you very much for asking me to inviting me to speak with you today. This is a topic that is important to all of our universities in the region, and in particular important to mine. I want to take. My remarks are in three parts. They won't be long. I think we need to recognize that entrepreneurship at its heart is about building an open, inclusive, and prosperous economy for us all. And I am compelled to think at the front end as I think about that overarching goal. We are trying to build a better world for all of the citizens of this globe. I like to think of the phrase global reach and local impact. We are connected all around the world, all of our universities thinking hard about how we make a difference to the communities in which we find ourselves. And inevitably, I look at our country and the ways in which we can and should and ought to be better. And I think of a phrase that was, I first heard from Kevin Lamoureux, who works at the University of Winnipeg on Indigenous issues. Here in this part of the world, we have peace and friendship treaties with our First Nations peoples. Those treaties have been observed more in the breach than in the observance, and we have a lot of work to do at this particular moment in time to address the calls to action of our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And part of that is so that our First Nations peoples are full participants in an open and prosperous and inclusive economy. We need to get on with that kind of work, and that is why many of us, are helping to support entrepreneurs. I was driven to tell you these remarks because my university was founded in 1785, a very interesting connection. Many of you are Americans here today. This part of the world was founded by loyalists, those who were leaving the United States in the wake of the Revolution, and people who were loyal to the Crown. We were established in 1785 after the settlers arrived in 1782 because they put such high value on education for their children. Just 3 years after arriving, they were already thinking about how they would educate their folks. They were entrepreneurs and innovators even back in that day, and that is what we honor here this morning and at this conference. I do want to take a few minutes to brag about my university, to give you some points about what we are up to. We are fortunate to be home to the Deshpande Center, a very valuable resource for emerging entrepreneurs in our region. You're going to hear from Desh in a few minutes, the keynote speaker. He got together with a another regional entrepreneur by the name of Jerry Pond to establish this center. We're very proud of the work they do. We also have a J. Herbert Smith Center for Technology Management and Entrepreneurship, which has been around for more than 30 years, promoting entrepreneurship and innovation within our university. We do like to believe these are part of our core values, things we are really committed to. We also have the Wallace McCain Institute that's aimed at supporting entrepreneurs who are a little bit further along in their paths. Lots of things going on that are committed to grow the entrepreneurial ecosystem that my colleagues referred to. But what we are really aiming at is our students. As Desh pointed out to me when we were first getting involved, there's only a handful of faculty and staff at any university, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of students. Many students would and will become entrepreneurs if the opportunities are pointed out to them. We know it's not for everyone. We do believe it is for far more students who come our way than have contemplated becoming an entrepreneur as a career. So that's a very important job that we all have to do. I will say, like my colleagues, we're very proud of the work that we do. We've promoted literally dozens and dozens of startups in the last few years coming out of our university. And I want to talk about collaboration between our universities finally. You know, in many ways, our universities are very competitive, and I think that's with each other, and I think that's a very, very good thing in many ways. We compete to be the best on many different fronts. We compete to hire people of the highest possible quality, and we're very fierce in that competition. And yet we realize at the end of the day, it's our job to help build a better society. And the only way we're going to be able to accomplish that is if we find ways to work together. So it is this lovely word, there's this word co-opetition, which I think captures it in a bit. We compete fiercely in some respects, and then we collaborate as much as we can in many other respects. And this would be a great example of this, where we do really believe it's very important to have a regional ecosystem that supports our entrepreneurs in their development. We are working very well together in this, but that requires constant attention from the very top, where we're trying to ensure, Desh likes to refer to the sandbox, and we all have to play nicely in the sandbox. That's not always easy, but we are committed to do it. Thank you very much. Enjoy your conference. Have a great time.
Thank you, Eddie. It is now my very great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Desh Deshpande. He is a change maker, a leader, and he's been very transformational. He is probably best known as an entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He's the co-founder of the Chelmsford A123 networks, Sycamore Networks, the Deshpande Center for Technological Innovation at MIT, and the Deshpande Foundation. Presently, Desh is the chairman of A123 Systems, Sycamore Networks, Tejas Networks, High Five, Sandstone Capital, Sparta Group, and sits on the board of Airvana. Desh is also a life member of the MIT Corporation Board of Trustees. In July 2010, Desh was asked to be a co-chair on the National Advisory Committee under the first Obama administration on innovation. There he led he was actually an inspiration to begin thinking about how we can develop a system for training STEM researchers, and he was one of the architects of the I-Corps program in the U.S. On a personal note, this is everything that Desh does. On a personal note, I had the pleasure of traveling with Desh to India, taking students and to his hometown in Hubli, and visited the sandbox and engaged in the dialogue. And I could tell you that it's truly transformational. He has transformed that part of India. He is an inspiration to so many, and truly a change maker of our time. Please join me in welcoming Desh Deshpande.
Good morning. Are you all ready to make a dent? Yeah. Good. Well, I think before I make my comments, let me just tell you a little bit about my background so that there's a context for what I'm saying here. I grew up in India, got my undergraduate and from IIT Madras, and then came to Atlantic provinces in 1973. I came to University of New Brunswick and then did my master's, taught for a year, did a PhD, so I was a prof for a short period of time. And then I worked in Toronto and moved to Boston in 1984. So I've been in Boston since 1984, did a bunch of companies. But for the last 10 years or so, almost 15 years now, working mostly on the foundation and trying to sort of figure out how do you use this innovation entrepreneurship to really make a big impact, to make a big dent. And so, let me set the framework for this. We all want to have this impact on the world. And so we sort of can divide the world into two parts, a developed and developing. Don't think of developed and developing as Canada and India. Think about it more as people who have disposable income and people who don't have disposable income. And so in Canada, US, it would probably be 80%, 20%. And with all the stuff that's going on, innovation, globalization, everything else, we know the divide is getting larger and larger. So that part, the bottom part, is also very important, both for Canada, US, and of course, places like India and Africa. And the developed economies are the ones where people do have disposable income. And the way you make a dent in those two sectors of the society is a little different. And that's the key point that I want to make today. And all these people try to make a difference there, the universities, entrepreneurs, government, and industry. And so how can you play together? How do you bring all these things together to actually have a big impact? Now, when people have disposable income, if they have a problem, they're looking for a solution, right? And they get solutions from a marketplace which is very competitive. So if you want to do something more, or if you want to solve some burning problem that they have, you have to come up with an idea that the world has not seen before. It has to be something new. Could be a business idea, could be a technology idea, could be an application, could be a process. But it has to be something new, because if you did the same thing that everybody else is doing, it's going to be hard to compete in that place. So innovation plays a big role in that part of the market. And that's been sort of my career. I'm a telecom engineer, and most of the companies I did were, I saw sort of this whole industry go from 300 bits per second on a telephone line to now trillions of bits per second. And so innovation has sort of really led that whole economy. And it's had a huge impact on the developed part of the economy, but also is slowly spread out to the developing part as well. So in 2000 is when I joined the MIT board. And the part of the reason why we set up this Deshpande Center at MIT is because most of the companies we started in 70s and 80s came out of technologies that were developed in Bell Labs or IBM Watson Lab and so on. But by year 2000, because of globalization, monopolies were gone. And it was so competitive that the industries can do development, but they cannot do research. So the center of gravity for idea generation had clearly moved back to universities, right? And the taxpayers spend a lot of money. In US, it's about 50 billion, and in Canada, it's probably 7, 8, 9, 10 billion. So it's a lot of money that the people spend in innovating things in universities. So the question is, what do you have to do to have a bigger impact? How do you make that work have bigger impact and create more opportunities to have an impact? And so universities are essentially the primary source of expanding human knowledge. And expanding human knowledge in any direction is a good thing, right? However, if you want to have an impact, there are some directions which will have bigger impact than other directions. So it's like a supply chain, right? Some ideas could have an impact next year, some 5 years from now, some 100 years from now, and they're all good. But is there a way so that we can have innovation have an impact, and that impact creates a virtuous cycles which feeds back into the innovation system, and therefore there is an economy that sort of really runs. So to do that, this is the sort of the basic idea. The basic idea is that innovation plus relevance is equal to impact. You know, when you create a innovation you cannot mandate. You cannot go to a professor and say, I want you to innovate, you know, go at it. You have to give him enough freedom. You have to create a nurturing environment. But every time you create a nurturing environment, the environment becomes clubby, and it moves further and further away from the real world, right? Think tanks, policymakers, universities, they all do the same thing. Because they work with each other, and it's intellectually very demanding, and it becomes clubby. And even though they all have deep desire for impact, they all get more into impressing each other as opposed to having the impact. And so, for example, MIT, it has 1,000 faculty. Out of the 1,000 faculty, there's about 50 Nobel Prize kind of guys, and you've got to leave them alone because they're not really driven or motivated by impact. They're just driven by the pure beauty of the idea itself, and we need those. But 95% of the professors want to cure cancer. They want to do something. And so this whole idea of the Deshpande Center at MIT is to add some value in that process. That is, instead of baking the whole idea, then patenting it, and then getting technology licensing offices to peddle it and find some ways to use it, you connect people to relevance upfront as they're baking the idea. And so if it's directed to some burning problem in the world, it's more likely that when the idea is complete, it'll have a pull in the marketplace. So, you know, if a faculty member and graduate students have an idea, and if they come and say, I got this great idea, I want to do something with it, you go talk to them 2 months from now, they'll have 10 more ideas, because that's their business. They're an idea machine. So the key value to be added is that out of those 10 ideas, which of those 10 ideas should they pursue? Left to themselves, they will pick an idea that appeals to their colleagues, right? And that's what I mean by impressing each other as opposed to impact. Whereas if you connect them to relevance, if you connect them to the real problems outside of the campus, then it's more likely that they'll pick and choose an idea that's more likely to have an impact. And so this has been a very successful model. We've funded maybe 140 different projects, and about 45 of them have become companies. And so it's been a very, very successful approach to do that. And so, so based on that model, NSF, you know, President Obama appointed the dean of MIT engineering at MIT to the NSF, head of NSF. And so he wanted to bring the Deshpande Center model to NSF. So we funded him to kick off this program for I-Core, which has been a very successful program. And then, of course, we have a center at UNB that Eddie talked about, the Deshpande Center. We have one at Queens, where I got my PhD from. It's called the Deshpande Center. And we have one at IIT Madras, where I got my undergraduate from. But then, also, a lot of the universities started calling up and saying, hey, you know, I would like to have a Deshpande Center. I said, I can't give you that much money, but you can come and learn. So very similar to this conference, we host a conference in June every year in Lowell, Massachusetts. And it's been growing 20% a year now, so we get about 100 universities as a part of it. And I think it's very similar. So what goes on in these meetings? It's, you know, this innovation entrepreneurship, it's a cultural change. And the cultural change does not happen top-down. It has to be a bottom-up approach. And so you need some change makers within an university to say, I'm going to make this change. And if you have the support of the president, that's all the better, right? And then these change makers, but I mean, this is entrepreneurship. Every time you start something new, it's always harder than you think. It takes longer, and it needs more money, right? There's only bad news there. There's no good news. And so each one of you is an entrepreneur, because each one of you in this room here is trying to bring about that cultural change within your university. And so I think it's just like entrepreneurs get together and talk about companies and talk about fundraising and marketing and discovering your customer and so on. I think it's nice for people to come together and say, hey, I started this thing. There'll be a lot of stories like I started my entrepreneurship center in a broom closet, and now it's like a big center, right? So it's always, how do we get a mindset to say that we can start with very little, just a lot of conviction, a lot of compassion, and make something happen. And so I think it's a very useful thing, and it's not something, 10 years ago, you had to go to universities and say, innovation entrepreneurship is important for you. That's not the issue anymore. Everybody signed up. The question is, how can you actually make it impactful? So this is sort of the developed economy, and I'm going to wrap up my comments quickly so that we have enough time for questions and answers. Now, if you look at the MIT, the president there, he calls it the innovation orchard. So it's not like just one thing that gets you going. You have to start with basic science, and then the proof of concept, the proof of product, startup formation, scaling the production, and then commercial production. So you need the whole ecosystem to actually make it all happen. But you have to develop it bottoms up. You always need some leader, somebody who comes and says, here, this is how you go from here to here, kind of thing. And so if you look at the MIT ecosystem, it's amazing how many different things there are that go on, because the whole ecosystem itself is entrepreneurial. Some student gets $500 and he starts a MIT Energy Initiative, and it's a large conference now where you get some of the best speakers with 1,200 attendees, right? And it all started with $500. So I think it's the ecosystem itself has to be entrepreneurial. You just have to look for sparks within the community, and when you see a spark, you somehow support it and you put a lot of fuel behind it. But don't put the fuel before you see the spark, because then all you're doing is putting off the fire. So I think that's the fundamental thing for all of you who are sort of in leadership positions and trying to make this change. You need infrastructure, you need policies, you need procedures, everything else. But they should follow the entrepreneurial activity. You need something working in one place, 2 places, 5 places. And then to make it in 50, and then 500 and 5,000, you need policies. You need ways to reduce friction. You need access to capital. You need a lot of things. But putting all those things up front without really having change makers is a sure way not to get it done. And the world has tried that. A lot of people, they want to build regional innovation centers, so they go ahead and build this huge infrastructure, and the whole thing just remains empty for a long time. It just becomes a real estate play. So looking for sparks within the community where you're trying to bring about a change is the key thing. You really have to develop a keen eye for that. And if you can do that, then I think it'll all work. So let me talk a little bit about working with people who don't have disposable income. People who don't have disposable income are somehow disadvantaged. They're not able to keep up with everything. So they're just struggling to get through the day. Particularly if you look at India and look at people who live on $2 a day, it's not like they're Googling all the time and saying, where do I get clean water? Where do I get good education or health care? And it applies to people in Canada and US as well. People who are not a part of the mainstream economy, who are left out, they don't have the ability to go look for things. And all the ecosystem that we've developed over the last 50 years, angel investing, venture capital, Wall Street, marketing, Amazon, Kmart, Walmart, all these things, they're all distribution channels for the people who have money, right? And so if you come up with an idea that the world has not seen before, you direct it to some burning problem in the world, the ecosystem has now been developed so that it can have an impact. But when you talk about people who don't have disposable income, it's not like they're looking for solutions. And also, a lot of times, the smart people always want to come up with solutions for these people. which is sort of, you don't know that customer base. Most of the innovators, entrepreneurs, who also have disposable income and live in this similar kind of community. So you know your kind. And so when you say this is their problem and this is the solution, you're likely to be correct with it because you live like them. But when you try to help people who live on $2 a day, you don't live like them. So you don't know your customer base. So trying to come up with solutions for those people is a big mistake in isolation. So number one, you have to co-create the solution with the people who need it. So relevance becomes more important than innovation. I think if you really co-create the solution within that community and you build capacity within that community to spread it out and to endorse it and to embrace it, and then you bring new ideas to solve the problem. But the idea itself does not have to be patentable, competitive, first time in the world, or any of those things, because you just need to co-create. It's not a very competitive marketplace. It's not like if you come up with a good solution for these people, there's hundreds of other companies which are trying to beat you there and get to that customer base. So when you want to solve problems for the underserved, make sure that you don't lead with the idea. You lead with relevance. And so to do this thing, we experiment, just like we started off MIT for more the developed economy. We started the Center for Social Innovation in India, because, if something works there, it can work here too. And so the major learnings after 10 years of working there have been that, number one, you have to build capacity to spread this solution. It has to be those people. It's not enough to get one very compassionate, high-end person to give up everything and go and help that community. That's more like social work, right? If you want to spread something good within that community, you have to build a huge amount of capacity within that community. And then you have to co-create the solution. And if you think you really have a solution, you'll know you have a solution when the whole community is craving for it. You're not pushing a solution on them. They're saying, please, please, I want it, right? And then you know you have a good product, you have a good solution. So to try this out, what we did was we said, first, let's build this capacity. And so we built a campus. It's a 300,000 square foot campus. And we trained 5,000 young men and women in that campus. These are all 18 to 25-year-olds. Most of the people, some have 10 years of education, some 15, some 17, but nobody has jobs, right? And so it's a 4-month intense program. It's almost like a boot camp. And it's amazing to see within 4 months, you can whip them into shape. And we never had a graduate who doesn't have a job. But also, these 5,000 people become a fantastic workforce to work for any for-profit, non-profit, anything within that segment. So it's not like some IIT, IIM high-end graduate with huge amount of compassion coming and saying, I want to give up everything in life and I want to help you, which is also useful. But those don't make systemic change. These people who only make maybe $200-300 a month are so excited, are so wanting to do something that they can actually get things done. And so all of this, and then about a few of them, 2-3% of them, come up with their own ideas for their own community. This is not a very high-end part of the market. This is more, again, poor farmers and educating and healthcare for the villages and so on. And so we have an incubator where we incubate these guys. And also, all of this works like a fantastic living lab where people can come and experiment different things. And so we have funded about 136 different programs, and out of which about 22 of them are looking pretty good. So let me just give you one example to tell you what I mean by good. So a lot of children in India come hungry to school. And this organization said, well, we can use advanced engineering, supply chain, procurement, accounting, all the good stuff, and maybe beat this problem. So they built this kitchen in the sandbox, which makes 185,000 meals a day, right? 185,000 meals a day. And they make it for 12 cents a meal. It's all local produced, local cuisine. It's food that children really love, so it's really co-created with the people who need it. And it costs only $30 to feed a child for the whole year, right? And we only serve government schools, so we have a partnership with the government. And the government's budget, unfortunately, in India is only $15. So they give us the 15, and we raise the other 15. We've been scaling it, and today we are at 1.6 million meals every day, right? So now that it has scale, but there's 100 million children who need to be fed. So it now has the scale and the capacity to absorb bigger and bigger ideas. So now it's ready for bigger innovations, right? But if those bigger innovations happen before you build this capacity and you build this ability to actually absorb ideas and do things and co-create the solution with the people who need it, it'll just remain to be a white paper, which is unfortunately the way the philanthropic world works right now, where it's all the high-end people, the big thinkers, the big funders, who all want to come up with solutions for these people, and the solutions most of the time are irrelevant and they don't really get anywhere. So let me summarize, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So universities, innovators, industries, they all have to come together and get started early in the innovation cycle if they want to have an impact on the developed economy, right? In the very competitive economy, which is what drives GDP and GNP and the economy and jobs and everything else. And also universities among themselves have to come together. I'm very impressed with the way, for example, MIT and Stanford and all these guys work together. They compete like crazy for every faculty member, every student. But MIT has 31 visiting committees. These are committees that meet every 2 years for a day and a half. And I've never seen a visiting committee where one of the key people there is not from Stanford. So it's almost like, and during this day and a half, the department spills their guts and tells them exactly what they're doing and what they're thinking and how they're going to compete and what are their future plans and everything else. And so they compete with Stanford day in and day out, but there's also people from Stanford sitting there and saying, I don't know if this is right and this is wrong and so on. So I think competing and cooperating is not so much it's a nice thing to do, it's the best way to set a new benchmark. Everything in life is about setting benchmarks. Once you know what the benchmark is, you can actually get there. But getting to know that benchmark is the hardest thing. And the more isolated you become, the lower is your benchmark, because that's all you know, right? So opening up and opening up your ideas, your plans, and sharing them with everybody else and getting people to comment on it is a fantastic way to really bring these things together. And then if you really want to work with social innovation, trying to help those who are left behind, don't lead with innovation. Co-create the solution with the people who need it, build capacity within that community so that they're excited about the solution, and then you can bring big ideas to scale it. So I think that's the framework that I would like to propose, so that, because we have universities working on both the social innovation and the technical innovation, and I think there's a way to sort of think about it so that the end result is we all want to make sure that there's a big impact on jobs, impact on economy, and there's a lot of new things to be figured out. I mean, previously for the last 25 years, it's been globalization that's been very disruptive, and for the next 25 years, it's going to be innovation that will be very disruptive. And every time this disruption happens, people have to reinvent themselves. There will be jobs, but there'll be jobs that don't look like anything like the jobs today. And so we need people to be innovative, to be risk takers, to be people who experiment with different things and really have fun with it. One way to think about life, I think, is there is 3 types of people in this world. Some people are oblivious to everything. You can leave them alone, they're happy people. Some people see a problem and they complain. Some people see a problem and get all excited about it, right? And the only difference between a vibrant community, a vibrant economy, and an impoverished community is a mix of these people. So impoverished communities, the complaining becomes the dominant culture. Why? Because problems become chronic, they get deadlocked. People try a little bit, they can't solve it. And then the only thing they can do is complain. So every time two people come together in impoverished communities, within 10 seconds, the whole conversation turns towards complaining. You know, why this can't be done, why that's corrupt, and why this is messed up, and why this is bureaucratic, all that stuff, right? And so the only way you make things vibrant is to convert complainers into problem solvers. And this is a program that we do in India. We brought that program back to US. We do a program called E for All, for impoverished communities, entrepreneurship for all. It's been an amazingly successful program where, because shared prosperity is not about making everybody rich. When people become, from problem solvers, they become problem solvers, they truly do become problem solvers. So when they get up in the morning, they're excited, because they have had a problem, they have thought about a solution, and they just can't wait to try it out. And so they're excited. And next day, it may not work, but again, they're excited. And so there is two characteristics of these problem solvers. Number one, they're very optimistic. And number two, they're very naive, right? And both of them are fantastic qualities, because when you think that every problem in this world is solvable, and we are optimistic that doesn't matter how hard your problem is, you're going to find a solution to it. So living every day of your life thinking that tomorrow is going to be better than today, I mean, what else is there? I mean, if you got it made, right? And so I think somehow, whenever you think about communities, universities, towns, nations, if there is a way we can find a way to make complainers into problem solvers, I think we create a very lively environment. Why is it that the entrepreneurs now, of course, are able to make huge differences and create a lot of wealth? But more than wealth, I mean, what they really enjoy is problem solving, is the fact that they get up in the morning and they're excited about things. And so it's bringing that excitement to a large piece of the population, which I think is the main task ahead of all of us. So thank you. Well, we got about 15 minutes, and there's 2 microphones. So if any of you have any questions, I'd be glad to.
Just a quick question, especially in the impoverished environments. One thing that I don't know was covered was need-based entrepreneurs. We talk about scale, and we talk about external resources being developed in innovation, but with micro-lending, need-based entrepreneurship in these areas where scale is not even a consideration. They're problem solvers exactly to be the case, but they're worried about solving today's problem, not has this problem scale and somehow move along throughout communities or throughout areas. I didn't know if you had some comments on that.
So the question is, should every entrepreneur, should every problem solver always think about scale? I think the way to think about this is every individual, every organization, every community is optimally set to solve a certain set of problems. And a lot of times, too many times, people all chase this, they all want to be the same thing. They all want to be the Olympic athlete, which does not work. And they feel like second rate, right? If you can find your niche, if you can find what is it that you're really good at, and build on it, so everybody has a place. So we need all these 7 billion people to be entrepreneurial and to be proud of a problem that they're trying to solve. So for example, this midday meal program, MIT is a powerhouse of innovation, right? But if I ask them to solve this problem, they'll screw it up royally. They'll probably come up with $5 a meal, and they'll think, they won't even know that it's $4.88 too expensive, right? So they're optimally suited problem who have a better context, who have a better innovation system, the right level of ambition, everything else. And what we need to do is to sort of really figure out and match the entrepreneurs with the problem that they're trying to solve, so that they have fun with it.
Desh, thanks so much. You know, as a university president, I always say I like to fertilize, not seed, but I like your spark. Only put the fuel where the spark is. That's great. For those of us who are ecosystem builders, just a question about, which sparks to feed. As you showed at the MIT slide, we know these ecosystems are very organic. There's no silver bullet. There's no one route. So as you're thinking about building an ecosystem, one, you look where the spark is. Two, you look where what's worked elsewhere. Three, you look if it's kind of customized to your local environment. But any other advice from your experience? You've looked at ecosystems around the world. What other advice you'd give ecosystem builders around how do we pick which sparks to fuel?
So for example, this program we do in India, right? So a traditional approach to do economic development would be you go there, you collect all kinds of data, you collect all the studies, and you say, what is the most important thing we need to do? And it'll be education and health and agriculture and all kinds of stuff. But the way we are trying to do it is just make people from complainers to problem solvers, and then they pick a problem to solve. And then it becomes so fashionable for them to pick problems to solve that everybody is looking for a problem to solve. And they will sort out and say, what is the most important problem to solve? In fact, you see a lot of that going on in Silicon Valley and Boston and so on. In fact, there are so many entrepreneurs now that they don't have problems to solve. And so each one of them comes up with a little app and tries to convince you as to why that'll save your life, right? And so, but the end result of that is when you have so many entrepreneurs looking for problems, there'll be no obvious problem that hangs around too long because somebody grabs it. So I think it's more, you just, in the venture capital world, it's always you fund an A team and a B idea versus an A idea and a B team. Because the idea that you start with is never the final idea. It goes through lots of iteration as you work on it. So I think you're always looking for A teams. You're looking for the sparks. You're looking for people who you think are real change makers and really encourage them and promote them. And they won't need a lot of help. They'll just need a little bit of pat on the back. I think one of the things that I did a lot with Obama in White House is that one of the biggest powers that the presidents have is the convening power, is the ability to invite them to your home or give them a little award or give them a dinner. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. Just invite them to your house.
So I love this idea of turning people into problem solvers. Could you talk a little bit more about access? Because if you're going to be talking to complainers, sometimes they don't have direct access to become problem solvers.
So, we sort of have a program in India for this called LEAD, which is a program for college kids. So the college kids in India tend to be, they come to the college, they memorize things, and they spit it out. There's not a lot of thinking, very passive learning. And they walk around in the society, and there's hundreds of problems, but they don't even notice it, right? And even if they notice it, it's never their problem. So we started this program where 4 kids come together, pick a problem to solve, and we give them like $10 or some small amount of money. And now we have 6,000 of these kids running around doing something or the other. And it's amazing how they raise their own money, they get the community energized and everything else. So the idea there is instead of building a lab for entrepreneurship, you say, I'm going to just use the society as a lab. There's enough problems here, right? And there's a big difference between when a professor gives a problem to solve, it's homework. When a student picks a problem to solve, it's entrepreneurship. So what's the subtle difference? The subtle difference is, let's say I teach Pythagoras' theorem and I give them a problem to solve. The student is constantly saying, how do I use Pythagoras' theorem to solve this particular problem? So it's very constrained thinking. And when these guys, for example, 4 kids came together and said, they saw these poor kids on the street begging. They were like 7, 8 years old. So these kids said, hey, these kids should be in school, not begging on the street. And they said, I'm going to solve this problem. And they actually solved it, right? And so when you solve problems like that, you are unconstrained. You don't say, I don't know this, I don't have resources. It's just the compassion and the conviction that you want to do it. So I think you have to somehow get people to fall in love with the problem they want to solve, as opposed to just become very good in solving a problem that somebody else gives.
Desh, there seems to have been an explosion in social entrepreneurship, or whatever you call it, in the U.S. among universities. And young people today have this great desire to help these developing countries and the underserved population. But as you pointed out, they sit in their university setting in somewhere in the U.S. And create a solution that is not co-created, is not practical, and is too expensive, or there's no one to buy it. But we have all this large number of well-meaning university students today who want to help and make the world better, especially in developing countries. How do we solve that problem? How do we allow those students to create solutions that are effective, co-created, and affordable?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think the good part about it is making these young people very compassionate. At least they get exposed to the idea of how there's a lot of other people who have nothing and who just live on it and everything else. But like you say, it's not impactful. It's billions of dollars. I mean, US alone spends $400 billion, right, in philanthropy. And not much of it has an impact, because even the foundations, they are more comfortable funding Harvard to do a $10 million study on poverty than actually doing the poverty, because it's so much more comforting for a Harvard prof to come and talk to the board and say, well, let me tell you how to do this, right? And so connecting them is a big part of it. So in MIT, there is Ratan Tata, who is like the Rockefeller of India, who gave a lot of money to MIT to do these Tata Fellows. And the Tata Fellows are supposed to do their master's and PhD at MIT, but also help poor people in India. So we just, last month, we started an orientation program in the Sandbox, because this is a large infrastructure. We got 700 people on the payroll and all that stuff, and we work very closely with people who live on $2 a day, $4 a day, $8 a day, and so on. So these kids, 25 of them, together with their professors, went and spent a week at Hubli. At least they got exposed to how these people live before they pick to choose a problem to solve. So that's just a starting point. But I think we have a long way to go, and there's a huge opportunity there, because the amount of mental cycles that people spend is very genuine. And that's not just US to India, it's US to US, Canada to Canada. It's just that I think we all feel comfortable within our orbits, within our circles, talking about poverty, talking about helping poor people, all this stuff. And somehow, it takes very little to impress people in that sector. All I have to do is I have to say, I went to India, I went to this little village, I saw this poor kid, he didn't have anything, I took my t-shirt out, I gave it to him, and everybody says, oh, really? And whereas you would never have that in the competitive, in a peer-reviewed technology or any idea. So we need to bring a little bit more of that impact. And a lot of times, the real, I think the problem is, a lot of times you need very simple solutions to solve these problems. And simple solutions get no credit in universities. You can't get a tenure, right? So we first need to build the infrastructure to do those simple things, get them to the point where they can absorb bigger ideas, and then connect bigger thinkers to those ideas. So, but it's a like even these students, it's a constant conflict between getting their PhD and actually being helpful. Because you can't get your PhD by saying, do the simple thing, it'll solve all the problems, right? So, yes.
Hi, thank you for your remarks. I'm originally from Detroit, which, as you may know, is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country. And then most recently went through bankruptcy, near bankruptcy, and came out of it, and is now a thriving entrepreneurial center. It's a really great place to live and work. However, it took a lot to get to turn. And it took people like Dan Gilbert, who invested a lot of capital and capacity. I've since moved to the rural South, and I find similarities between the rural South and Detroit, what Detroit went through a few years ago. And I wonder if you could address building capacity, because while I think you had in Detroit, and you still have it, and in the South where I'm at now, a lot of co-creation of ideas, this notion of building capacity and having somebody like a bright shining star like Dan Gilbert come and help build that capacity is so critical.
Yeah.
It's hard to find, and I wonder if you could address that part of your remarks. Thank you.
So, I think you can Google eforall.org. That's a program that we do in the US. We are right now running it in 5 places. Hopefully we can take it to 300 places and places in Canada and so on. So I think, Detroit, you probably could have put that capital that went in there in a lot more efficient way. Because a lot of the people, like a lot of my sort of contemporaries who run big hedge funds and BlackRock and Blackstone, all these things, when they think about the American dream, they always think about going to these impoverished communities, picking a buried nugget, somebody who's very capable but has not had the opportunity, and to lift them up and give them $1 billion and have them build a very large business. To me, that doesn't solve the problems that you're talking about. We really need to create this entrepreneurship, grassroots, everywhere, right? So this E for All is truly E for All. What happens is, in this Lowell Lawrence, for example, which is an abandoned textile mill town, we started the program, and so now about 500 people come out of the woodworks and say, I have an idea, I want to do something, the pitch contest. And every 6 months, we down select about 15 of them, put them through a 14-week very rigorous program. We've done about 300 of them, about 240 of them are up and running, right? And so it's truly E for all. 60% of them are unemployed, 70% women, a few PhDs, 1 or 2, mostly school dropouts, and some are for-profit, some are non-profit. Some are scalable, but no Facebook kind of thing. There's one company that could hire maybe 1,000 people, which is very huge. But most of them are very lifestyle kind of companies. So you need that excitement, grassroots excitement. And so I think you can do it with not a huge amount of resource. I mean, it still requires maybe about $300,000-400,000 a year to run the program. But it's been an amazingly successful program in terms of, it's again a cultural change. You can't go to a town that has 50,000 people that have been impoverished and suddenly say, I'm going to make you all entrepreneurial. You somehow have to spot like 5 sparks, 5 people, and then go from 5 to 50 to 500 to 5,000. At some point, it takes a life of its own, and then they don't need help. So, yes.
So I hope you'll indulge a slightly inward-looking question for those of us in the room who most of us run entrepreneurship programs. What I'm seeing, and you alluded to this earlier in your talk, is a lot of people who have entrepreneurial mindsets. I think we all do. A lot of our funders do. We're seeing a change in mindset in academic environments as well, as you heard earlier. And so what I see happening is a lot of people saying, let's go be entrepreneurial. Here's an experiment for a new program. Let's go fund it as an experiment and see what happens. And if it works, someone will pick it up and take it to the next level. Just like happens in the real world. You put some seed money in a company, you de-risk it, and then someone else will come along and take it. The problem is, it feels to me now like everyone's doing that, and I'm wondering who this someone else is that's going to come along and fund the successful experiments. I think the wildly successful ones will be fine, but what about the pretty good ones? Where do we go? How can we make sure that we're cultivating those funding sources to keep going with the ones that are pretty good and worth keeping with?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it'll automatically get sorted out. I think it's if you're the ecosystem builder, you should not be in the game of picking winners and losers, because it's a very hard thing to do. Your opportunity is to make a lot of people play, and some of them will rise up. If it's a social entrepreneurship thing, then there'll be grants, foundations, government that'll have to fund it. If it's a for-profit, then venture capitals, private equity, whatever. People who want to make money with money are the people who are available, but they'll find it. When I started my first company in 86 or something, those days, venture capital funds would be like $20-30 million. That would be like all they would have. So when they wrote a check for $1 million, it was like a big deal for them. So they wanted to make sure that you were totally committed. You mortgaged your home, your wife, your kids, and everything else, right? So you had to go without a salary at least for 1 year before they believed in you, kind of thing. So it used to be hard, but people made it happen, right? And so I think there's always two messages. If you're talking to the entrepreneur, you have to tell the entrepreneurs, your job is to get the job done. Don't complain, right? If your conviction is strong enough, you're going to bulldoze through all the issues. Because even if you bulldoze through some issues that other people solve for you, there'll be other issues. So you just have to become a good bulldozer as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. If you're an ecosystem player, you want to keep reducing that friction as much as you can. You want to invite the people who have money, who wants to give out. And they will come more and more as you line up better and better players, right? So I think you just need to keep working on both sides. But you cannot get stuck with the fact that, hey, nobody from my thing is getting funded because, hey, they're not quite ready for the National League yet, right? So
time for one more question.
Desh, thank you very much. I'm visiting from Alaska, and we have a lot of issues with rural communities, some horrible statistics that we are leading in. We're doing well in some areas, poorly in others. And I wonder if you can address some of the things that you've done to overcome cultural inertia in some of the rural communities. It would be different in India. It might be women without men in the household, but how you sort of brought people around, and maybe also about reluctance to give up some of the brain talent or relationships in rural communities once you bring them into the urban centers to get them to go back. If that helps. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, I think for an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I think, for example, right here in Newfoundland, there is a Fogo Island. There's a person called Zita Cobb. You know, she was a CFO at JDS, which was one of the very successful optical companies. And so she's been in Fogo Island now for, maybe the last 10 years or so. And it's amazing what she's done in that particular island to revive the whole thing. So she's gotten those people involved. You know, they now run a tourist inn for people coming and visiting the Fogo Island and so on. And they sell their art and whatever. I think a lot of it is just bringing pride back and bringing the hope back. Hope is the biggest asset. And in some ways, these problems are very hard. In other ways, they're very easy, because on a scale of 1 to 10, I find that, let's say, MIT is like 9.8. To take it from 9.8 to 9.9, it's a pretty hard stuff. You really have to compete and come up with a fantastic idea, all that stuff. But on a scale of 1 to 10, the place we work in Hubli in India is like 1. So to go from 1 to 1.2, it's a piece of cake. And when you do that, people see such a big change, 20% change in what they're doing, that they get hugely inspired, hugely excited. So somehow you have to create that excitement and hope. And that sort of drives you through. Because once people get on that positive momentum, then I think it just drives the whole train, I think. So, great. Well, thank you very much. And
thank
all
you,
the best.
Desh. On behalf of everyone, you've inspired us. So thank you very much, Desh. Yeah. You've actually set the dialogue, a fantastic framework for the dialogue, and creating challenges for us to think about for those of us in our entrepreneurship centers, and spreading entrepreneurship across the campus. So thank you. I invite everyone now to join for coffee break. It's down on the lower level in the sculpture court, and we'll reconvene at 10:30 for the great debate. Thank you.
Whenever, are we ready? Well, welcome back. I'm Jeff Hornsby. I'm the Executive Director of the Rainier Institute for Entrepreneurship at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And I get to be the moderator of this great debate. Just one quick announcement. There's only one debate during this session due to time limitations, and this is it. And we've got an esteemed panel of experts, combatants, and sometimes just downright ornery people to talk about the topic. The topic is, what really is the purpose of an entrepreneurship center? Is it to educate, or is it to develop and launch ventures? So, if our panelists are ready, take off the gloves. We have Alex DeNoble from San Diego State University, or we should say Alex the Dreamer DeNoble. Have a seat. We have Jeff the Realist Reed from Georgetown. They comprise the group that will debate in the affirmative about education. Then, on the opposition side, we have Mike the Killer Morris from University of Florida, and Ted the Zealot Zoller from North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So we do have some ground rules, but I doubt they'll follow any of them. But this has been an important topic for many years that I've been attending GCEC, too many years to even count anymore. But what is the real purpose? And we talk about this, and we talk about the elements of entrepreneurship programs, centers, and everything. And so it's time to lay it on the line and hear about it. So the first thing I'll do is let each person just take a minute and do their pitch about themselves and what they do. And so we'll start with Ted there, and then move down the line. So just give a quick introduction of yourselves. Grab your mics, guys.
So I'm Ted Zoller. I'm the director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies at UNC Chapel Hill. And yeah, go Heels, that's what I have to say. And by the way, we're a little off-weighted here because we have another heel sitting up on stage, and that's Jeff Reed, who's a graduate of the institution, even though he's on the opposite side.
Don't try to suck up already.
Oh, come on, you're so great, Jeff. It's so beautiful. I love it. So I run the curricular programs at UNC Chapel Hill, and we have a model, Learn, Launch, Lead. Learn's a curriculum, Launch is the experience, and Lead is our apprenticeship. And I hope you come to some of our sessions and learn more about our model. And just glad to be here with these guys. So.
Thanks, Ted. I'm Mike Morris from the University of Florida. I'm George and Lisa Etheridge Professor of Entrepreneurship there.
Hey, my name is Jeff Reed. I'm the founding director of the Georgetown University Entrepreneurship Initiative. I did once create and I founded the Entrepreneurship Center at UNC Chapel Hill. So Ted, thanks for keeping the seat warm. And thrilled to be here. Look forward to this.
Hi, I'm Alex DeNoble. I'm the executive director of the Lavin Entrepreneurship Center at San Diego State University, and we host in April the California Entrepreneurship Educators Conference. Thank you.
All right. Again, we thank our panelists. We hope to get into a good debate, but also the debate includes you in the audience. So there's plenty of time allotted for you to state your points of view later on and ask questions of the panel as well. So I'm going to turn it over to the affirmative side to take the first position.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And
Time's up. Time's up. Yep.
All right. You're going to interrupt me already. What do you think about fairness here? I'll prepare my opening comments now. Thank you. So I first learned the term vanity metrics when I read Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup. And vanity metrics are those metrics that are not really indicative of how well a company or an organization performs. You know, and I heard him say, that vanity metrics are the kind of PR to make your competitors feel bad. Okay, so my question is, why are we so concerned about the number of startups that come from any program? Is that really the true measure of what your program is about and the quality of that program? And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Because why do we tend to focus? Why, when we're at different conferences, do I brag, or do we all brag amongst our colleagues about our famous students that went on to start great companies and sell them and do all of these great things? And you know, one of the things that I've learned over time in watching our university grow and develop is that donors and your MarCom, your marketing communications people at your university, love that metric, that statistic of how many startups are coming out of your program. It's used constantly. And from our perspective, I ask that question. Is the number of startups coming from your university, is that really indicative of the quality of your entrepreneurship education? And that's what I want to bring into question today. Because what is our university's mission? You heard Desh Deshpande talk about it a little bit earlier. We're in the business from a university perspective of training our students to be problem solvers. You know, from that perspective, we want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to be problem solvers. And so, at a broad university perspective, think about it that way, but what are we trying to do as entrepreneurship educators? We're trying to develop a mindset amongst our students. We want them to develop competencies in entrepreneurship. We've been working together on trying to come up with a common set of what constitutes entrepreneurial competencies, okay? And what we want to do is to design the kind of curriculum that is going to give our students some opportunities to develop those competencies, to develop their confidence in executing those competencies. We want them to develop their professional networks and the confidence on how to use those kinds of professional networks. And so that's a big undertaking for any university. And my comment to you is that when we focus so much on startups, that's only one tool in our pedagogical toolbox in terms of how we help our students develop these kind of entrepreneurial competencies. And so I fundamentally believe in experiential learning. I think it's a powerful tool. I think that we all employ it in very different kinds of ways. But at the same time, my premise to you is that there is no one single approach that we can rely on as the dominant pedagogy in any entrepreneurship program. So when we talk about an overemphasis on the startup process, I want to highlight, in the short time that I have with you here, I want to highlight two problems that we must consider. The first problem is that when we focus on startups, to what extent are we excluding other members of our community, other students that may not be ready for the startup? And the second area that I want to focus on is this notion of codependency that can tend to develop as a result of students working in startups in an incubator type of environment that we offer at a university. And so I want you to think about, how do students get involved in an incubator or in an accelerator at your university? I know in our situation, our university, students have to go through an application process. And part of that application process, they've got to make presentations, and they're going to either get accepted or not accepted into the incubator or accelerator. And if you look at the acceptance rates to get into an incubator, even at a high acceptance rate, it's about 20%. And so from that perspective, the 20% of the people are the students are going to require most of the attention of the entrepreneurship center people that are focused on just working with the startups in an accelerator. And my question is, what do you do with the other students that don't get accepted into the incubator? If you're going to focus on just a small percentage that are actually going to start companies, are we leaving out the rest of the community of students? The other piece that I want to try to emphasize is that, what are we doing in our incubators? I find myself, as we look at our own incubator, and as I talk to many of my colleagues about how they run their incubators, it's our students get a free place to stay, okay, to work in. They get, many of the incubators provide free food. I mean, you can see my list up here. They get free mentoring. They get free consulting. They get free lawyer. They get free legal help. In San Diego, I learned that speaking with attorneys costs about $500 an hour. And then I speak to my colleague, Jeff Reed, in DC. Those attorneys get $800 an hour, okay? Or more, all right? And yet our students are getting all of that for free. Okay, and so yes, they're focused on developing their companies, but when they graduate, ultimately they're going to have to leave the incubator. And many of them can fall into the trap of codependency. And codependency really, I mean, are these students really prepared to go out and pay market prices for facilities, for the legal help, for the other aspects that are involved in running a company once you spin out of the cocoon of a university? And so from that perspective, I argue that there are many different pedagogies that we could use from an experiential perspective that can help our students to develop their competencies, their skill sets, their confidence, their professional networks. And I think that we as educators really have to look at a whole compendium of different approaches for different students. They could participate in hackathons.
Okay, Alex, we gotta cut you off.
You're gonna cut me off?
I'm gonna cut you off, and we gotta go to the other side now.
All right.
Okay.
So
that's it.
Okay, wait a minute. We need a minute.
We gotta stay on schedule.
Okay, Alex makes some great points, of course. I'd like to make it clear why everything he said is wrong. Doing, trying, discovering, experimenting, overcoming, creating, striving, attempting, adapting, accomplishing, failing. Entrepreneurship is ultimately about action. If we think about what entrepreneurship is, and we take Bill Gartner's perspective, at the end of the day, it's the act of creating a venture. Importantly, ventures can take a lot of different forms. if I got a student who starts a recycling program in his apartment complex, that's a venture. They can be created in lots of different contexts, and they're not that hard to create. Starting a business is easy. Growing and sustaining it is another question, but the idea of starting a venture is not rocket science. Most importantly, and it's easier than ever, most importantly though, starting a venture represents a learning laboratory. I think we have to get past the silly notion, and it troubles me that we continue to hear it, that most students have no business starting a venture. Well, they're not ready. It's not for them. That somehow that entrepreneurship is for some select group of 5% or 10% of our students. At the University of Florida, we have 50,000 students, and I believe all 50,000 of them should start something. Entrepreneurship is democratic. Entrepreneurship is universal. And so we want students to learn to create ventures all through their lives. Startup ventures, corporate ventures, family ventures, social ventures, neighborhood ventures, social ventures, part-time ventures, full-time ventures, but it's about creating ventures. We very much focus in entrepreneurship education these days on a process paradigm, on teaching entrepreneurship as a process. But I think more critical is the extent to which we convey to our students that entrepreneurship is a journey. And it's a messy journey. It's a chaotic journey. It's a non-linear journey that is emergent, that involves feedback loops and starting over and pursuing steps in parallel and cycling backwards, ups and downs. It's hard to convey that journey simply in a classroom, simply through content. Think about what we teach. And in this slide, I've tried to capture the essence of entrepreneurship education. Are we teaching business basics? Basically, we're just reteaching marketing and finance and accounting, but in a startup context? Or are we teaching entrepreneurship basics? Are we teaching the entrepreneurial process and entrepreneurial orientation and entrepreneurial contexts and entrepreneurial cognition? Or are we teaching entrepreneurial thinking and acting, a mindset? And my argument is we need to increasingly be moving away from teaching business basics and towards the right. And the more we're teaching the things on the right, opportunity recognition, risk mitigation, how to leverage resources, formulating and compelling vision. The more we're doing the things on the right, the more traditional classroom education is not going to suffice, that it has to be more experiential, centered on the creation of ventures. If we think about this mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, a way of thinking and acting, getting students to understand that they are agents of change, conveying a sense of healthy dissatisfaction, getting students to understand that failure is a part of the whole entrepreneurial experience, that entrepreneurs fail every day. As we teach them more about how to engage in guerrilla skills, we convey this mindset. It's hard to do that in the isolation of the textbook or the lecture in the classroom. As Alex mentioned, we're increasingly focused on conveying competencies, opportunity recognition, opportunity assessment, how to leverage resources and bootstrap. These competencies are action-oriented, applied capabilities that require experiencing actual venture creation in a university context. We actually did a study where we measured those 13 entrepreneurial competencies I just shared with you, and we measured students exposed to entrepreneurship simply through a classroom, textbook, lecture, exam format versus students exposed to intense venture creation-related activity. And we found strong, statistically significant differences in the improvement on 11 of the 13 competencies, much higher with the students starting ventures or involved in aspects of venture creation. So what do we want students to experience? Venture creation and the venture creation of others through consulting and that sort of thing. The creation of something from nothing. The pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources controlled. A nonlinear, chaotic, unpredictable journey. The fact that the entrepreneur is an actor in a play without any script. You can't simply teach that with conventional education. We've done some work on the entrepreneurial experience. How do entrepreneurs actually experience the creation of a venture? Well, it's exciting, and it's stressful, and it's lonely, and it's frustrating, and it's freedom, and it's learning, and these are experiential aspects of creating a venture that, again, the simple classroom content lecture perspective cannot adequately convey. We need to think about entrepreneurship the way a pianist thinks about becoming a great pianist, or the way a gymnast thinks about becoming a great gymnast. Ask those folks what makes you great, and they will tell you practice. I practice the piano 5 hours a day. I practice the vault 4 hours a day. We need to focus more on practice, on conveying entrepreneurial practice by having students start things in incubators, in the classroom, in all the different pedagogical kind of approaches. The central theme should be they're creating something. It is through the creation of something that they will experience the different forms of practice that Heidi Neck and her colleagues talk about. It is through the creation of something that they will experience Kolb's different kinds of learning styles. So we want them to practice venture creation, not just by being in incubators, but by consulting to small businesses where they experience venture creation, by developing prototypes, by pitching to local banks, by engaging in competitions, lots of different forms, but again, the theme is the student is creating something. And finally, let's just take something we try to teach. We try to teach failure. But if we rely on the educational model that Alex talks about, and we're teaching failure, what does a student learn? Well, they learn a definition of failure. They learn that failure is not supposed to be a bad thing, that they may understand that there are different kinds of failures. They might recognize that failure and success aren't necessarily opposites, that failure can produce success, so they can learn these concepts. But through venture creation, through hands-on experiencing as part of the educational experience, they have a better sense of the nature of failure, the degrees of failure that happen, how actual learning derives from failure. They come to a clearer sense of how failure happens and what sort of contributions it makes and it doesn't. They develop a personal strategy and an approach for dealing with, for managing and learning from failure. Hence, it's all about venture creation. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
Wow. Guys, what happened? What happened to you? Like, Mike, Ted, you guys are great leaders in this field. You know, I've looked up to you for years. Well, not literally, but I mean, next I think you're going to tell us that we're going to get so tired of winning all the time. This case, I thought Mike did a very good job of articulating the value of experiential learning, right? But that's not what we're here to debate, right? I think Alex also articulated the value of experiential learning, but the point here is it's about learning. It's about education. You really helped us make our case. Education is more important than venture creation when it comes to our primary mission, right? That's what we're debating. It's not how to be better educators, which you're a great educator, and I think you outlined some great ways to educate our students. But if you really believe 50,000 University of Florida students are all going to go start businesses right away, then maybe you've been in the swamp a little long. The idea that our programs should be evaluated primarily based on the number of ventures our students create really is preposterous when you think about the fact that we work for universities and colleges. If you believe that education is not your primary mission, then you should probably go work for an accelerator. The Y Combinator, these guys, there are programs out there that are their primary purpose is to start ventures. Those are the models you should follow if you really are all about venture creation. And, Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, I know Paul Graham. Paul Graham is a friend of mine. I served with Paul Graham. Gentlemen, you are no Paul Graham. As I've traveled around this country, I've met lots of people with interesting stories, and I want to share some of those stories with you. And I want to tell you about little Billy. Little Billy is a senior in college. He really wants to be an entrepreneur. He's got this great idea for an app that will help you get your beer faster at the bar. Or it'll help you get food delivered to your dorm. I'm not sure. It does all these great things. It's amazing. And he is so excited about becoming an entrepreneur because that's what the cool professors and the other cool students, and there's this hero worship about entrepreneurs in our society. So he really wants to be an entrepreneur. So all he needs is $20,000 to build his app, and then it's going to be great. Well, as an educator, it is my job to make sure Billy makes good decisions about life to the best of my ability, right? My job as an educator is not to push all of my students to start companies. Little Billy might want to learn more in our classrooms and our experiential learning about how to start a company, and there are great ways that experiential learning can help accomplish that. He should not start that company. And if we measure ourselves based on how many student startups we're trying to create, then we're going to do a disservice to those students like Billy. Let me tell you also about little Sally. Sally, she's a first-generation college student. Her parents immigrated to the U.S., and they have been entrepreneurial. She's very interested in entrepreneurship. She loves the idea. But she has a lot of student loan debt. Her family is dependent on her. She can get no support from them. She really wants to start a company, but she doesn't have a great idea right now. She has an entrepreneurial mindset, but maybe now's not the time for her to start a company. Maybe what we as educators should do is plant the seeds, teach her the lessons through all the great methodologies you described. Teach her how to be an entrepreneur, but recognize that pushing her to be an entrepreneur right now is also not a good call. So as educators, it's our job to be educators, to help our students become the best people they can become. That does not always mean starting a company. If we do that, if we push everyone to start companies, then we're being elitist. It's not good for the students. It's not good for our schools. It's not good for our centers.
By the way, I just want to apologize to the AV people in the room for the microphone just destroyed, the $300 microphone. I just want to tell you, Jeff, the swamp has been drained. I don't know what you're talking about. So there's no swamp. What swamp? What swamp are we talking about? I would like to bring up little Billy and little Sally because, frankly, I found that a little creepy. the fact that you're actually spending time with little Billy and little Sally in such an intimate way is perhaps one of the ways that I'm just wondering, maybe you don't know your place in the process that we're trying to do here, you know? So here's what I'm thinking. Little Billy, little Sally, let's take off all the controls. You know, the problem with that entrepreneurship education is we've been reaching too long. We've been trying to put our arms around people and just say, tuck in with us and we're going to show you the way. In a lot of ways, entrepreneurship is about taking off all the controls. It's about ultimately giving entrepreneurs the opportunity to test themselves, to be who they will be. You know, in many ways, entrepreneurship is non-predictive. And I will state, after 20 years of teaching entrepreneurship and after being an entrepreneur for most of my life, I recognize that you can't predict who's going to be a successful entrepreneur. I would defy anyone in this room to come to me with some kind of formula where you can build a great high-performance entrepreneur. I could never predict them. They come out of the woodwork. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that entrepreneurship is, like Mike was saying, my partner Mike was saying, entrepreneurship's about action, it's about doing. And I've been riffing a lot on this recently about, you know, the association of this word entrepreneurship and action, as Mike was saying before. Fundamentally, when we boil it all down, entrepreneurship is about pragmatism. It's about a practical sense of taking things into your own hands. It's about giving yourself permission to do something about something you would like to change. Frankly, entrepreneurship is the great liberating power. That's why entrepreneurship education, while there are many frameworks where you can bring people to a level of skills, that's a necessary but not sufficient condition to prepare our students for the future. As Jeff was saying before, and as Alex iterated at the beginning, entrepreneurship is a process. And you know, we can tuck behind the old adage, oh, we should be measuring our outcomes in the long term. Someday they'll be successful. Well, actually, we have a responsibility today to open up the doors to our students so that they see the opportunity in the future and that they can find their own place in that opportunity. I wish I could curate the insights that are in this room right now, because I would be amazed, and I think you would all be amazed by the ecosystem of an insight that you have. It's amazing that there's such a half-life to what we teach and what we have learned about entrepreneurship. The half-life of facts is being accelerated because, as Mike was saying, entrepreneurship is a practice. We should be learning from the practice. Now, I might not be Paul Graham. I will never be as cool as Jeff Reed, but I'll tell you that I can actually collate and do things that Paul Graham can't do because I'm able to see it in perspective and realize that little Billy and little Sally need to be given just the opportunity to go and be who they want to be. So, you know, as Mike was saying, it's a nonlinear process, you know, and the other part of it is we should be democratizing entrepreneurship. You know, I'm going to leave you with this one idea. Why is entrepreneurship venturing? The word entrepreneurship is becoming increasingly, you might be surprised by this, unattainable to most people. Entrepreneurs seem to be these magical people, these unicorns that sit in Silicon Valley. You know, when we ask, universally when I ask my students in the class, name the 20 best entrepreneurs, you know, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or, you know, I don't know, Meg Whitman come up. But the truth is, those aren't my heroes. My heroes are the people that come from the street that we give a little bit of opportunity to, and they go off and do amazing things, and they are everywhere, and they're every day. Entrepreneurs are creators. You know, there's a great adage of the concept of the world is made up, and I don't know if you'd agree, I bet you will, and the truth is all of us agree on both sides, you know, that's kind of ironic, but, you know, for purposes of competing, I would just say that the world is made up of 99% maintainers and 1% creators. That 1% is what we're going for. Entrepreneurship is about creation. We talk about it as value creation, but if you were to put a better, more attainable word around entrepreneurship, it wouldn't be the word entrepreneur, which is a French derivative for taking, you know, actually taking as an intermediate, but it would be about creators, builders, optimists, pioneers, and dare I say, venturers. Ultimately, what we should be doing is giving our students the multiple reps so that they're able to test what they can do as venturers. So I'm not going to drop the mic, but I think I've just done it.
Yeah, I don't think you want to drop the mic, because I just got a bill for $300 for repairs to Jeffrey's microphone now.
Your Honor, I move we dismiss this case and because of lack of insufficient argument from our opponent.
So what I want to do is...
Sure enough, trying to use a legal loophole to try to win an argument.
We've got two microphones here. So the folks that agree with Alex and Jeff, I want you to go to that microphone. And the folks that agree with Mike and Ted, I want you to go to this microphone. And while your people are lining up like that, I'm going to give each side 2 minutes for a little bit of a rebuttal, or to say whatever the heck they want to say. So, Alex and Jeff?
Rebuttal, huh? It's all about experiential learning. And I still contend that there are many, many ways for our students to get that kind of a pedagogical experience. And you know, we've really got to take that to heart. And you know, we don't measure the quality of our programs by the sheer number of students that start companies from our programs. I think that's a good thing, and we promote that, but entrepreneurship programs are much bigger than that, and they serve a much larger audience.
I think the mistake in the premise of the other side is that they keep talking about numbers. We're not counting. It isn't an issue of how many ventures came out this year or last year. The more important issue is that the act of venture creation is the ultimate learning experience. And the more we can integrate that into all of our pedagogies and all of the things that we do in university entrepreneurship programs, the further down the road we will become. You know, there's still people that come to us and try to argue you can't teach entrepreneurship. Well, of course you can. We can help students develop their entrepreneurial potential. We can help them develop that entrepreneurial mindset. But our ability to do so has to be centered around action and them taking action and us supporting them taking action. I believe profoundly that too many of us simply teach entrepreneurship as a process, or simply teach entrepreneurship as the recognition and exploitation of an opportunity. Entrepreneurship is fire in a bottle. Entrepreneurship is ultimately about empowerment and transformation. And one doesn't experience and feel and truly come to understand that empowerment and transformation unless they're enabled to act. There was an interesting conversation recently with the founder of the Grameen Bank, who, as you know, was our first social entrepreneur to win the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago. And his basic notion in trying to, in talking about the whole issue of how we bring entrepreneurship education to the poor, is that men and women were not built to work for someone else. We need to unleash the entrepreneurial power by focusing on how and why and ways to create ventures. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll start over here, and then we'll just move back and forth. Anybody else on the other side, come on down and line up.
Yeah, you need something for Jeff and for Alex, somebody.
We already made the case so strongly, I think.
Listen to you.
Go ahead.
All right, so my name is Jennifer McFadden. I'm Associate Director of Entrepreneurial Programs at the School of Management at Yale. I would like all the women in the crowd to stand up, please. We will have gone through a quarter of this conference by the time we break after lunch, and you do not have any female representation. There is a gender issue in this world. What are you doing about it?
Come on up. Come on up. Come on up. Seriously. Come on up.
Come on up.
Anybody else want to come up? And we can talk about diversity all day long.
And you know, every year they put out a call for submissions for programs. And so I encourage everybody to submit some of their best ideas for programs. Regardless of who's on the panel, we want good ideas for the program. So as someone who helped plan a conference 3 years ago here, all good ideas are welcome, no matter who submits.
Jeff, just for the record, I'm a father of 3 daughters. No, it's not. No, it's not. I believe as strongly in women's issues as you are, and I apologize.
You should, not just because you have daughters.
I apologize for being a white male being up here on the stage. You know.
Hey, real quick.
Is that the point you wanted to make?
I've had a long career.
That
and,
is absolutely not the point I wanted to make.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing. I've never worked for a man. That's one thing I want to say proudly. And the other thing is, all I've learned about entrepreneurship, I learned from my mother. And
Okay,
I gotta
guys,
tell you-
seriously, the last thing you should be doing is talking about your mother and your daughters.
Why
It is
not?
a fundamental.
Why not?
You women
They're
in
our
the room will
models.
find that offensive. You should be doing this because.
You guys should own it.
What?
I think you should own that.
I think this
it's
is a huge
offensive.
issue. It's an important issue. I think we all.
Go ahead, speak.
You shouldn't think about gender issues just because you have a daughter and a mother. If you did not have a daughter, would you be thinking about it?
Yes?
Okay.
I don't think the people up here have an issue.
No.
But I think it's really wonderful leadership that you actually brought it up. Because I noticed when the 4 of us were walking out, like, oh, that's a real issue. And we need to accelerate leadership. We need to accelerate leadership. I think that you're absolutely right to call us out, the fact that there are 5 white men up here. I don't like, by the way, the term that's being used. That's actually a very angry term, old white men. I think that sucks. However, I think it's absolutely
say old white
legit.
men.
No, I know. I'm just saying that publicly. But I think it's really cool that you actually called us up on that, and I think it's really cool you stood up here and invite everyone. There are a lot of people that are not celebrated in our communities, and we need to celebrate everyone.
So I hope you'll jump into the conversation and share your views on the topic. That would be great.
Yeah, I certainly will. So I think our theory on this is that we try to pull as many people into the entrepreneurial process as possible. If you look at students these days, they're entering into a world that I, as a student who graduated back in the 90s, did not have even remotely the same experience that they're going to have. Job security is gone. Technology is taking over everything. So we view both the immersion into the entrepreneurial process and access to technology and technology classes is critical to preparing our students for the world that they're entering into after graduation. We view, and I teach a class founders practicum at the School of Management, where I have students working on ventures for credit. I don't care whether they succeed or fail. I care whether or not they learn in the process and can go out and take an idea, whether it's post-graduation immediately, whether it's 5 years out, whether it's 20 years out, and turn that idea into an organization that can change the world.
So my name is Kit Needham. I'm with CMU, and if you really unpacked what I was listening to both sides, I think you're both in raging agreement that everybody needs to be made more entrepreneurial, and then some real entrepreneurs will emerge from it because now they have the mindset, they have the tool set in order to do it. So I think what was really at heart of it, at least for me, and I was hoping to hear a point that Alex brought up, that in a way the number of universities have structured their programs, and I have been at events like this where I've actually asked the question, what do you do about your accelerator programs? And some of this competes with the classes. There's no one time where everybody can come. And I've actually heard faculty, as well as others, say, oh, we expect them to cut. If they're really serious about this, they ought to take a leave of absence from school, that their education actually suffers. And, you know, CMU, you're paying $60,000 a year for your education. That doesn't go over well with parents. So what I really like to hear is a little bit, it's how you structure your programs. How are they set up that are you competing with the education to give those experiences, or is it baked into the curriculum and the activities? So that's, to me, was the real debate.
Well, I think it's a great point. We do have a gator hatchery where students are starting businesses, but our argument is not every school needs to create a hatchery or an incubator or an accelerator. Our issue is students should be encouraged to start ventures and to have experiences related to the creation of ventures, social ventures, any sorts of ventures. And so I can tell you, with our hatchery, we do struggle with students who get so caught up in accelerator activities that their studies may suffer. You know, we've had students who left the university and pursue their venture, and you know, we're hoping someday they graduate. But that's just not the argument that we're making. Our point is in the classroom. And I think the problem lies less with the people in the incubators. It lies more with the people in the classroom who have this, you know, their lectures and their slides and so forth. Instead of building the educational experience and the content that's delivered in the classroom around the unique entrepreneurial experiences that different students are having or should be encouraged to have.
The only thing I'd add is that, you know, and I want you to hear me on this, I honestly believe in the future that our programs are going to be measured by the outcomes of our graduates. You hear me on that? Now, does that mean that we have to produce, you know, 100x unicorn type, you know, billion-dollar multiple high valuation companies? No. We're talking about some kind of impact measure. And if you notice, the latest rankings came out, and the ranking survey actually asked us to count the number of successful entrepreneurs associated with our organizations. I think all of us would agree. I don't think there's a person in this room that would disagree with me when I say that they're measuring the wrong thing. How do you measure impact? And for instance, Mike just mentioned the founder of the Grameen Bank. How do you measure the impact of an individual like that? Mother Teresa, how do you measure her impact? So I think we can do better in measuring that outcome, but I do believe the future looks like that. We have to think about how we produce the resources and ultimately the environment that'll encourage people to do what they can do to reach their potential. I look at our job as more coach than as teacher.
There are several sessions on the program agenda about metrics for our programs, so I think that's definitely a hot topic that we're all dealing with.
So we deal with it at Yale. We have, at least in my class, and anybody who's taking kind of the higher level entrepreneurship classes at the School of Management, we sit down and talk to the students at the beginning of the semester about their goals, what they want to get out of it, what they want to learn, personal goals about leadership, et cetera, because again, they're spending $65K, and if they get halfway through the semester and their venture's sucking and they're doing a horrible job, we tell them to just stop, and we'll give them half credit for the semester and they can go take another class, because there's so many other classes that they can learn something from across the university.
So in our situation, I mean, we've got multiple centers that focus on design thinking. We do have an incubator, an accelerator, and at our Lavin Center, we focus on infusing our students into the community through internships and through mentorships and through different kinds of competitions. So we really try to take a broad perspective and engage our students in experiential learning in a myriad of different ways.
Okay.
All right. Hello. My name is Justin Haycock. I'm with Florida Polytechnic University. My big question, I guess, is really trying to understand like how an idea turns from a project and turns into a venture. Because I'm very much the believer of really like applied side of entrepreneurship. But I work basically in an engineering university. We produce between about 1,000 and 1,500 projects in 1 year. But obviously, I can't really count those as startups. So really, at what point would you guys help me clarify what point does a student project turn into a venture?
Well, I think the venture in formation is what we're talking about. And so if you want to delineate it as having a registered business, if you want to delineate it as having revenue, if you want to delineate it as, I'm not sure that it matters. I mean, to us, what it is a path, and there are steps. And so we are encouraging that there be this portfolio of activities that students, so they have developed a prototype, they have created a website, the issue is progress down that path, more so than the bells go off, you now have a venture.
So what is the university? I think one of the reasons that we all work in the university environment is universities are committed to problem solving in various disciplines. You're mentioning in your context it's an engineering and applied science type of program. Obviously, you're studying the problem, the fundamental problems of what's known about phenomena, and then you're adding new insights that will help extend that learner's knowledge of that phenomena. Well, I would like to suggest that we are not doing a strong enough job by kind of gleaning over the key complexity of some of the problems we're trying to solve with design thinking. I think design thinking dumbs it down. We actually have to do better and look at the semantics of problems as a system. And I would posit that in engineering, you understand systems theory and complexity. We have to think about complex problems. So I think the process that it begins with is first leveraging, understanding complexity, understanding the arena of the problem, then doing design thinking once you find a potential way of influencing the problem, and then starting to plan the venture. Many students stop at understanding the problem and then developing a novel solution. It's the act of acting on that novel solution that's the moment it becomes a venture. And we need to encourage students to go to the next level. Why don't they? They think that someone else out there is going to go do it. And I think one of the most wise things that's ever been said is, if not me, if not now, when, if not me, who? And that's Kennedy, right? We have to encourage students to go do it and give them the power. And that's why I really love the leadership that was here, because we have to change the way the power structure, democratize the way we're thinking about stuff.
So I can chime in a little bit about what we're doing with that at Yale. We just launched a new initiative last year that actually opened the doors about a month and a half ago. Cass Walker-Harvey is in the back, which is the Sci Center for Innovative Thinking. And the whole purpose was to broaden the scope of how we were approaching entrepreneurial ventures, entrepreneurial students, to make it more open to people from the art school or people from the forestry school who really could work with people from the engineering school to develop new projects and develop solutions to the tough problems. Where Yale excels, you know, we have an incredibly small computer science and engineering school. We have, you know, MIT's got 4,500 engineers. We have 5,000 undergraduate students across all disciplines. And we will only excel as an institution if we're trying to solve those problems by being highly interdisciplinary. And where we do excel is exactly what Ted said, the systems-based approach to problem solving and finding solutions by bringing the right people in the room to tackle them.
Okay, let's move over.
Hi, I'm Mark Wilson from University of Rochester. Thanks for the interesting sides. I think obviously the solution lies as a balance in the middle, but I would like to critique the experiential only side, because there's a problem that many of us are wrestling with. And if we're trying to build entrepreneurship and innovation management as actually a discipline which has minors and majors and degrees, every single class cannot be the exact same. And one of the problems with experiential is, to exaggerate, you come into class, you have a week to get an idea, you form some teams, then you do a business plan or business model canvas or some other thing, and at the end you pitch to a pretend Shark Tank. So every class is the same. So I'm sure you have some kind of counter to that. If everyone took your side of the argument and just became all experiential, how do you help to do curriculum planning if someone's planning on taking 4 or 5 entrepreneurship classes so that they're not all the exact same class?
See, that's a problem. I mean, that's That's the difference between curricular and co-curricular. I think a comprehensive program in entrepreneurship has to focus on both. You know, and we didn't talk today about how we've designed our specialization in undergraduate in entrepreneurship, nor our cross-campus minor in entrepreneurship, nor our graduate specialization or concentration in entrepreneurship. But that is just as much a part of what we do as in my role as center director on the co-curricular side. So we really have to look holistically at curricular and co-curricular when we prepare our students.
I think the problem that you raise is a very legitimate one. And it's, I mean, there are a couple problems built into to what you said. The fact that schools develop 15 entrepreneurship courses, but 80% of the content is replicated across them is a different problem. The challenge of, well, come to class and you got 2 weeks to come up with an idea and then 13 weeks to write a plan or a model or whatever, it is an unfair and classic problem with traditional approaches to education. The point is we need to create climates and environments around our entrepreneurship programs where students are constantly coming up with ideas, where students are constantly encouraged and reinforced to put these ideas out there, doing so through the co-curricular, the curricular, and instead we create, well, it's that entrepreneurship classroom where you have to come up with the idea, and under ridiculous circumstances that it's got to be a viable venture, but you got to come up with it in 2 weeks or whatever. So I think it has more to do with broadening the focus on coming up with ideas constantly as students.
My name is Gary Bishop. I'm with Montana State University, and I teach entrepreneurship. I like your ideas. I like your thoughts. One of the things I think we have done, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people in this room is teaching an entrepreneurial class right now? It's tough to teach entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a mind think. We have to let our students, we have to teach our students those basic thoughts, basic learnings. But entrepreneurship, when you put students together, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to run off and play games, or they're not going to do anything, and you might get one. And you know, what we need to do, we don't need to produce dozens and dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs developing things. What it needs is one good one, to walk out the door with something like maybe Steve Jobs created. And then you've hit a home run.
Right on, I think you're right. You know, it's amazing to me, I don't know if you've experienced this in your classrooms, but you know, when you pull out, you know, some of the work that's been done in Lean, for instance, and you start presenting it at the undergraduate level, you're going to find that most of your students have already been exposed to it. Like I said before, the half-life of learning is actually getting shorter. So, you know, it's actually bringing the skill acquisition forward in the process. But all of us also know that young people are not generally in the position to have a command over all the basic tools they need to be successful. So I think education, classical education, and Mike's written a great book on this topic, as a matter of fact, classical education creates a platform for skill acquisition, but we have to actually extend beyond the classroom for the experience, the engagement, the praxis of entrepreneurship. And that's why I believe pragmatics is the key to the whole thing.
Good, thank you.
By the way, I'm Michael Gelfer with UMKC. I'm not kissing up to my department chair, Jeff, at the moment, but I have a feeling my comments could, you know, make my graduation happen or not. However, you know, and to credit to Jeff, and what I'm saying actually transcends a number of the comments to this point, is the importance of co-curricular and cross-campus, and Jeff's been a huge advocate, along with Tony Mendez, implementing that mandate. But my question kind of goes to the curriculum that is being used as well, not a criticism, Jeff, but it seems like we focus a lot on our entrepreneurship students. And when we look at co-curricular and cross-campus, what I hear from people is that they're still using the same curriculum that they're using with their undergraduate students and not necessarily tailoring those syllabi or curriculum for the other schools that they work with. I just wanted to get your feelings on this, and to Ted's point, how would you even incorporate that in measurement, because it's not something that I think whoever is doing the measurement really takes into account. Anyone?
We're going to do this, we're running out of time, so we're going to do this little rapid fire. I want all the folks that are in line, so just one person to respond to each question at this point so we can kind of move it along.
And I think you've pointed out a fundamental challenge that a lot of us are running into, that maybe why there wasn't a great answer immediately forthcoming, is it's hard to define exactly who your students are on your campus. Sometimes you might have a group that's in a minor or a major, and you can say those are our entrepreneurial students. But then if you're reaching out broadly to students who maybe take a couple of classes, maybe they take no classes, but they participate in some co-curricular stuff, it's hard for most of us to measure and capture all those metrics. When you're talking about curriculum, it is hard to adapt curriculum. Some schools do a really good job of that. They have one program for business students. They have a different program for non-business students. But it's not something that there's necessarily one perfect right answer for. Which is probably the case with almost every one of our issues. Right?
Thank you so much. My name is Cornelia Holstrunk, and I'm with Princeton University. I enjoyed the panel a lot, and I enjoy it even more now with the additional panelists up there. I want to actually pick on something that I heard sort of throughout, and the term entrepreneurship or entrepreneur. I heard about the initiatives at Yale, at Princeton as well. We're trying to diversify the pool of entrepreneurs. The word itself is problematic. I loved the words creator, builder, optimist. Any thoughts on broadening or reconsidering the term even to one that would encourage more people to get involved and sort of self-identify with?
I'd love to hear whatever ideas are out there. We're struggling with the same question. We haven't found a better term yet.
Yeah, so we're going through this right now. Cass and I have launched this initiative, We at Yale, which is basically this umbrella organization across the university to bring more women from across the campus, across disciplines. And our goal in that is making it incredibly open to everybody. And so I'm building the website right now, and on there I have creator, innovator, entrepreneur, scientist, artist. We just try to keep it as broad as possible. We really, although it is we and we as entrepreneur, we really do recognize that that's an issue. And one of her mandates at Sci-City is actually to make it as inclusive as possible. And so that comes from top down, president, provost, to their program, and that is diversity across all sectors, including, making the group of people that we're touching and the interests that they have more diverse. So.
I'd like to make the counter case. I believe in the word entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, and I think it's important. What's exciting about conferences like this and what's going on is that we are building a discipline of entrepreneurship. And I think if you water that down or you try to use other terms or whatever, you take away from the potential and the possibility. I mean, to me, the difference with entrepreneurs, they don't just create. They don't just innovate. It's the overcoming the obstacles. It's the tenacity. It's the resilience. It's those competencies and those other issues that go to actually getting something implemented. And the implementation part, the action part, I think doesn't necessarily come through with those other terms, in terms of responsibility for something happening.
And I would argue that if you are going to be successful in any of those endeavors, whether it's as an artist, as a creative, as a scientist, et cetera, you have to have all of those characteristics, and that we should be embedding those characteristics in as many people across campus as we can.
I agree with you. I think labels are problematic in any way, and universities are particularly tricky places because entrepreneurship in the university setting sometimes is associated almost directly with capitalist, right? And some people, just are allergic to that word for whatever reason.
But my sense is that we have to do a great job, and I don't disagree with Mike at all. I think that entrepreneurship is something we should embrace, but we have to cast a wider tent. And I'll throw out a couple other things. You know, the gender issue has been raised here very openly with a very important statement today. But I would also submit to you that there are other forms of diversity we need to be focused on. For instance, different cultures that are alienated by any given society anywhere. It's just part of the process. And I'm not legitimating it, obviously. But one of the concerns, and I've been riffing on this a lot, is when I say entrepreneurship's unattainable, go talk to the HVAC technician about entrepreneurship someday. And what I'd suggest to you is, you know, some of the people that have really fundamentally given back to our society are the people who have started small businesses. And we kind of relegate them to the corner. Oh, they're not scalable, they're little, they're small, they're blue collar, they're working class, they're dirty jobs. I want to bring that right back into the center stage because it's about doing it. And you can do it with traditional things. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be an entrepreneur.
I'm going to ask the last two to, if you guys could fire your comments both right in a row, and then we'll let the panel deal with those as the closing.
This mic is taller than me, so I'm trying to manage. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Rastogi. I'm with the University of Tampa, and great arguments from both sides. 5 years ago, I was an undergraduate student, so a lot of this is really speaking to me. I was an entrepreneurship major, and I worked through my classes on ventures and projects and did really well, won competitions, and at the end, when I was getting ready to graduate, I had to make a decision. Do I continue to pursue this venture, or do I go get some real life experience? Because quite honestly, I didn't know anything, and I still don't know anything. And I went down the corporate route, and I worked in the private sector for a technology company. And I would say, from my experience, that the experiences and the knowledge and the relationships and the things that I learned over the past 5 years working at a technology company have, I think, better equipped me to be an entrepreneur today. So I just wanted to ask you all, you know, for the folks that you think, okay, you shouldn't go and pursue this company now, what are you doing to encourage them? Are you encouraging them to go work in industries that they want to pursue? Are you encouraging them to engage in entrepreneurship? I would like to hear a little bit more about that from you.
I'll take that one.
I think we want both questions.
Yeah, let's get the other question in too.
Okay. My name is Rosalind Wyatt, and I'm from Houston, Texas, University of St. Thomas. This is my first time attending this conference, so forgive this very fundamental question. You talked about starting ventures. What do you define as a venture? I have a couple of, I will say I have 3 or 4 students who have come to me saying, I've created a YouTube channel. One student who, he's an African-American student, but he created a whole universe of anime, you know. So are we calling that a venture? Because he says, I have 3 million or 6 million views, and I get paid for this. And the thing of it is that I wanted to say is that we have students like this all over the university. They don't want to define themselves as entrepreneurs necessarily. Do we scoop them in, or do we try to get them to formalize that by, doing the minor in entrepreneurship or doing the minor in social entrepreneurship or whatever we have? And somebody mentioned before about being labeled as a capitalist. It's interesting because I have a number of students, I work in social entrepreneurship, but I have a number of students who are in psych or in nursing or whatever. And when you say, hey, what about entrepreneurship? They're like, well, does that mean that I'm going to become, whatever? No. So it's that challenge. So I'll let now.
So in answer to the first question, just responding to the first question, we run a specialty program, kind of like an honors program for people that really have expressed an interest in entrepreneurship. And we put them through heavy experiential, heavily training program. But what we found out, we have about 200 alumni from this specialty program that I'm describing to you. And what we found out is that maybe about 30 to 35 of them right now have their own companies. And even with those that have started their own companies, most of them started them 3 to 5 years out. They didn't really start it right at the very beginning, I mean, coming out of school. Now, of course, we all get some students that are running companies before they even graduate. But it's been our experience, most of the students coming through our entrepreneurship program end up going out and working for a number of years and come back to it when they feel that they're ready. And that's really a personal decision. It's an idiosyncratic kind of a thing.
On the first question, I just would come back to the example I gave at the outset. To me, a venture is not necessarily a registered LLC with a business bank account that's generating profitability. As I said, if a kid starts a recycling program in his apartment complex and gets that implemented so that there's meaningful social benefit happening, that's a venture. And so we need to take a broader view, and that's why I think any student and every student can start ventures.
I would just add, the way I approach it again is that meet with them at the beginning of the semester, meet with all the students that I meet with, I talk to them about it and say, why are you doing this? What's driving you to try to start something while you're here? And for anybody who's trying to pursue a technology-related career who does not have tech background, I actually tell them I won't talk to them again unless they go on and learn base-level HTML, CSS, because I think it's so important to have those sorts of skills, particularly if you are going to be building a web application. But then you have the set of skills that if you go out and you work in technology afterwards, you can talk about, well, I tried to launch this product, I learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I learned some React, I'm really well suited now, I understand the process, I may not be the person who's out there coding the app, but I understand what the process is for the person who's doing that, and I have more empathy for it. And I have more empathy as an employee if I go into a startup for what that startup founder is going through.
Yeah, I consider my job is to help our students identify and pursue whatever it is that they are passionate about, right? It's hard for young people to necessarily know. We all say pursue your passion. So one of the ways we've done that, one of our faculty members said, hey, I've been teaching this entrepreneurship class for years, and only a small number of students actually start a company. So am I not a good teacher? Should I adjust the way I do this? And what he did was he rearranged the course, and it's now a course where instead of the students working on a business idea, they spend a few weeks figuring out what topic or problem in the world that they are most excited about. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with the business. And then they write a book about that. And through basically 2-semester program, they actually publish books. And all but one in the first term became bestsellers. So it's a new thing. We're actually having an event next week about it for the second group. But what the book becomes, it's a signal to the world about what they're passionate about and what they're becoming an expert in. And that signal has actually had huge benefits to these students. Some of them have started a company based on the business idea. Others have gotten jobs in a field that they're really passionate about, and they're building expertise and knowledge and contacts that will help them someday if they do want to start a company in that field. So there's lots of ways I think that we can help students figure out whatever that entrepreneurial path for them is. It's not always about starting a company or a venture of any type right after school.
Okay. That's right. Yeah.
Here, Ted.
You know, it's amazing. We just did a cohort study of 500 serial entrepreneurs from UNC Chapel Hill. And when I see serial entrepreneurs, people who've done it more than once. We measured their first entrepreneurial event, and it was 8.75 years after graduation. In most cases, these are people who've done it twice or more in their careers, and they generally do their first entrepreneurial event 8.75 years after graduation. We shouldn't be modeling our programs to do startups immediately thereafter, but there's always a subset of students that do that. I do believe there's a greater supply of entrepreneurs out there, and to answer the second question, I think we need to celebrate stories that aren't about the Silicon Valley paradigm, nor about kind of the intelligentsia and its association with entrepreneurship. frankly, some of the best entrepreneurs aren't classically the most intelligent people in the world. These are people who are doers or actors or goers. So I would like to suggest that we as a group of academics and practitioners celebrate stories that are not celebrated. The everyday stories, the stories that are coming from communities that we don't see, you know, stories that are about people of different backgrounds, and certainly stories that aren't driven just from the middle and upper class. So.
All right, that wraps up the debate. I don't know we necessarily need to take sides on who was right and who was wrong. And to borrow some words from Mike Morris from years ago, talking about what entrepreneurship centers and programs do and making people dream, think, and act. And I think we showed the importance of both thinking and acting, but I think really, in my closing remark is that across our campus, across gender, across culture, and everything else, we need to foster more dreaming, and then we'll get better thinking and better acting. Thank you very much. Ed?
So before everybody heads out, just a few navigational issues. For lunch is out that door, one building, other side of the street to the right, the Student Union Building. We're in the McInnes Room. After lunch, we're in the building directly across the street from here, the Rowe School of Business. We have 6 presentation rooms. The smallest room has a capacity of 60, the biggest 120. There are